On July 21st, 2023, a single string of commands sent to a spacecraft 12 billion miles from Earth went out exactly as planned, and within moments, humanity's second most distant emissary into the galaxy went completely silent. No warning, no error message, just a tiny 2-degree shift in the direction of an antenna, invisible to anyone watching, and a nearly 50-year-old machine that had survived launch, the crushing radiation of Jupiter, the cold of Neptune, and the emptiness of interstellar space suddenly stopped talking to the only planet it had ever known. It would take NASA nearly 2 weeks, one of the most creative emergency procedures in the history of deep space communication, and a single command, shouted across more than 12 billion miles of empty space to find out whether Voyager 2 was still alive at all. Tonight, we're looking at exactly what happened during those two reach a spacecraft that couldn't hear anything pointed away from Earth, and why in 2026 this aging spacecraft is facing an even more permanent kind of silence, one that no clever engineering trick will be able to fix. To understand how unsettling this event actually was, you first have to understand just how fragile communication with Voyager 2 has always been, even under normal conditions. Launched in 1977, Voyager 2 spent decades completing what remains the only close-up tour of all 4 giant outer planets ever conducted by a single spacecraft flying past Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune before crossing into true interstellar space in November 2018. By 2023, it had traveled so far from Earth that a radio signal sent at the speed of light, the fastest anything in the universe can travel, took 18.5 hours just to complete a one-way trip. That means every single command sent to the spacecraft and every single response sent back involved a minimum round-trip delay of 37 hours, an entire day and a half of waiting just to learn whether a single instruction had worked. Think about what that actually means for the people running this mission day to day. There's no live troubleshooting possible, no instant feedback loop the way engineers might expect when working on hardware here on Earth. Every decision has to be made carefully, in advance, because a single mistake takes 18.5 hours just to reveal itself. And by the time it does, the spacecraft may already be operating under whatever flawed instruction was sent, with no way to intervene in real time. It's a bit like performing surgery through the mail, writing out each instruction, sending it off, and waiting the better part of a day just to find out whether the patient survived the last step. On top of that extreme distance, Voyager 2 depends entirely on a single high gain antenna to talk to Earth at all, precisely aimed and continuously adjusted to compensate for the spacecraft's own rotation and the constantly shifting relative positions of Earth and the spacecraft as both move through space. That antenna has to stay pointed with real precision because even a small misalignment is enough to lose the signal, entirely across a distance measured in billions of miles. On July 21st, 2023, a routine series of planned commands sent from Mission Control inadvertently caused an error, tilting Voyager 2's antenna just 2 degrees away from Earth. 2 degrees doesn't sound like much. Across 12 billion miles of space, it was more than enough to sever the connection completely. Voyager 2 could no longer receive commands from Earth, and Earth could no longer receive any data from Voyager 2. For the engineers at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, this was a genuinely frightening scenario. Not because the spacecraft was necessarily damaged, but because there was no way to know that for certain. Voyager 2 was still functioning normally right up until the moment its antenna drifted off target. As far as anyone could tell, it likely continued operating exactly as designed after the error, still gathering data, still running its instruments, simply unable to tell anyone back on Earth that it was doing so. The mission had a built-in safeguard for exactly this kind of scenario, a pre-programmed routine designed to automatically reorient the spacecraft's antenna back toward Earth. But that reset wasn't scheduled to trigger until mid-October, nearly 3 months after contact had been lost. 3 months of uncertainty, with no way to confirm whether the spacecraft that had just spent 46 years surviving the harshest environment humanity has ever sent hardware into was still, in fact, alive. 3 months might not sound catastrophic on its own, but consider what was actually at stake. Voyager 2 is irreplaceable. There's no backup spacecraft waiting in a hangar somewhere, no quick replacement mission that could be launched to pick up where it left off. Everything Voyager 2 has ever discovered, and everything it might still discover in the years it has left, depends entirely on this one specific, aging piece of hardware continuing to function and continuing to talk to Earth. A 3-month gap wasn't just an inconvenience for the schedule. It was 3 months during which nobody could rule out the possibility that the mission had simply ended, silently, with no confirmation and no closure, somewhere in the vast dark distance between Earth and interstellar space. Mission engineers weren't willing to simply wait that long if they didn't have to. On August 1st, 2023, using multiple dishes from NASA's Deep Space Network, the global system of massive radio antennas responsible for communicating with every deep space mission NASA operates, engineers detected something reassuring. A faint carrier signal coming from the direction of Voyager 2. It wasn't strong enough to carry any actual data, no telemetry, no science, nothing decodable at all. But its mere presence confirmed something crucial. The spacecraft was still transmitting, it was still alive, still functioning, simply pointed in the wrong direction to actually communicate. That faint heartbeat gave engineers the confidence to attempt something far more aggressive than simply waiting for October. On August 2nd, 2023, the Deep Space Network's facility in Canberra, Australia, prepared what NASA itself described as the equivalent of an interstellar shout, a high-intensity radio command far more powerful than routine transmissions, aimed directly at Voyager 2's last known position, carrying a single instruction: reorient the antenna and point it back toward Earth. It was, by the team's own admission, something close to a Hail Mary. Nobody could be certain the command would even reach the spacecraft, let alone that Voyager 2's own systems, still functioning on decades-old hardware, would successfully execute a reorientation command it hadn't been specifically expecting. Then came the wait. With an 18.5-hour one-way light time separating Earth from the spacecraft, the command needed nearly a full day just to arrive, and any response, if there was one at all, would take just as long to make the return trip. That meant engineers had to wait a full 37 hours, more than a day and a half, with absolutely no way to check on progress in the meantime, simply not knowing whether the shout across interstellar space had worked, or whether they'd just spent their best attempt on a command that vanished into the dark without ever reaching its target. Picture what that 37 hours must have actually felt like inside mission control. There was no partial update, no progress bar, no intermediate signal to check in on. The command was sent, and then there was simply nothing to do but wait, fully aware that the outcome had likely already been decided the moment the signal reached Voyager 2, roughly halfway through that waiting period, with no way to know it yet. Engineers who had spent careers working on this mission were left refreshing displays that had nothing new to show, running through contingency plans for what to try next if the shout failed, and quietly hoping that decades of engineering built into hardware from the 1970s would hold up long enough to receive one more command correctly. At 12:29 a.m. Eastern Time on August 4th, 2023, the wait ended. Voyager 2 began transmitting science and telemetry data again, confirming not only that the interstellar shout had worked, but that the spacecraft had spent its entire 2 weeks of silence operating exactly as intended, still on its expected trajectory, still functioning normally the entire time. NASA's own mission update summed up the moment simply: full communications had been reestablished, and the 50-year-old spacecraft was, against genuinely long odds, completely fine. What makes this story worth revisiting now in 2026 isn't just the drama of those 2 silent weeks. It's what that scare revealed about how fragile this entire mission has become, and how much closer Voyager 2 now sits to a much more permanent kind of silence. The spacecraft runs on radioisotope thermoelectric generators, converting the heat of decaying plutonium into electricity. And that power supply has been shrinking every single year since launch, with absolutely no way to refuel or repair it from billions of miles away. To conserve what little power remains, NASA has spent recent years shutting down Voyager 2's instruments one after another, carefully deciding which experiments to sacrifice and in what order to squeeze the maximum possible science out of a power budget that only ever shrinks. As of January 2026, according to the U.S. Geological Survey's own summary of the mission, both Voyager spacecraft remain operational and communicating from interstellar space, but are now described as being in survival mode, their most basic operational state, conserving every available watt simply to keep transmitting at all. Current estimates suggest Voyager 2's dwindling power supply may force the shutdown of its last remaining scientific instrument sometime around this year, a threshold the mission has been approaching for years and can no longer postpone indefinitely. Unlike the 2023 communications scare, there will be no interstellar shout, capable of reversing that particular kind of silence. A misaligned antenna can be corrected with the right command, given enough patience and a bit of luck. A power source that has simply run out of capacity cannot be recharged from 12 billion miles away, no matter how creative the engineering team gets. That distinction matters more than it might first appear. The 2023 blackout was, in the end, a solvable problem, a mechanical misalignment with a genuine fix once engineers found the right approach. The power decline facing Voyager 2 now is a fundamentally different kind of challenge, a slow, predictable, physically unavoidable decay that no amount of ingenuity can reverse, only delay. Every instrument shutdown buys the mission a little more time, a few more months or years of continued communication, but the trajectory of that power curve has never once pointed anywhere but down, and eventually there won't be enough electricity left to power even the transmitter itself. For now, though, Voyager 2 is still out there, still transmitting, still following the same trajectory it settled into after that anxious 37-hour wait back in 2023. The 2023 blackout remains the longest gap in communication the mission has ever experienced. A stark reminder of just how easily a machine this old, this far away, and this dependent on perfect antenna alignment could slip permanently out of reach. It didn't. NASA's engineers found a way to shout across more than 12 billion miles of empty space and get an answer back. But every year that passes brings the mission closer to a kind of silence no shout, however powerful, will ever be able to undo. Somewhere between now and that eventual, unavoidable shutdown, Voyager 2 will keep sending back whatever data its remaining instruments can still gather, one faint signal at a time, from a part of the galaxy no other human-made object has ever transmitted from before. If you want to be here when Voyager 2 finally reaches the end of its nearly 50-year mission, subscribe and turn on notifications, because this aging spacecraft has already proven it can survive scares nobody thought it would recover from, and nobody knows exactly how much longer it has left to keep transmitting.